Welcome to part 11 of this series, The State of the United States Economy and Society. I'm Edward Dodson. This section is titled, Can We Feed Everyone? Well, most of us live in towns and cities. We're totally dependent on others to produce the food we require. Yet there are significant threats to our food supply. Climate change, conversion of agricultural land to other uses, and the high cost of agricultural land each requires a public policy response that will result in sustainability of our essential land resources and the production of the food that we need. About 920 million acres of land across the United States is dedicated to agriculture. Some of the best land is under increasing pressure from sprawling development. One consequence is that even rural land prices are climbing to a level that prevents younger adults who would like to enter farming from acquiring or even leasing sufficient land. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that almost 40% of U.S. farmland is owned by non-operators who lease land out to actual farmers. More than half of cropland is rented, compared to just over 25% of pasture land. In general, rental activity is concentrated in grain production areas. The American Farm Bureau Federation data indicates that about 96% of all agricultural land is still owned by U.S. citizens or U.S. business entities. Nevertheless, there is growing concern in the U.S. over food security. There are now 24 states that specifically limit or restrict foreign individuals, businesses, or governments from acquiring or owning an interest in farmland within their state. Those identified here in dark green passed laws regarding farmland in 2023. Without doubt, the greatest natural threat to agricultural production is the combination of rising average temperatures and declining rainfall in many parts of the country. The nation's primary aquifers are also in decline, with the result that wide areas of land in arid regions may eventually no longer be able to rely on irrigation for cultivation of crops. The Ogallala Aquifer, whose total water storage is about equal to that of Lake Huron in the Midwest, is the single most important source of water in the High Plains region, providing nearly all the water for residential, industrial, and agricultural use. The disappearance of this supply of water would cause the value of land in the region to fall dramatically, and potentially a great migration of people from the region. The aquifer supports nearly 1/5 of the wheat, corn, cotton, and cattle produced in the United States. Crops provide grains and hay for confined feeding of cattle and hogs and for dairies. The cattle feedlots support a large meatpacking industry. All this is threatened by the loss of access to water, but conservation efforts are hampered by counterproductive subsidies that drive wasteful water consumption. Some far-sighted farmers are responding to these challenges. Even as they pursue efficiencies in irrigation, many are shifting from water-intensive crops like cotton to wheat. Still others, notably in West Texas, are converting back to non-irrigated dry land agriculture, a recognition of the stark limitations of irrigation dependency. Despite the economic importance of agricultural production, the preservation of water resources has not been addressed by the states that share and are dependent upon the aquifer. Well, let's take a look at agricultural exports. In 2024, the total value of U.S. agricultural exports was about $176 billion. With exports to 189 different countries and territories. Another year of record combined South American soybean production, led by a doubling of the Argentine crop, a strongly valued US dollar, and diminished Chinese demand resulted in a mid-2024 forecasted US soybean export crop of 52 million metric tons, or 2 million bushels worth $24.5 billion. The decline since 2021 is because of the loss of the Chinese market. Well, there's also the great danger of monoculture risk. An important lesson not all farmers have learned is the risk of growing a single crop. In the short run, monoculture reduces costs of production, but exposes the farmer to crop failure or unforeseen falling prices and/or demand reduction. The environmental damage caused by monoculture production is also potentially devastating. David A. Widmar, an agriculture economist at Purdue, explains that U.S. producers have in fact been diversifying for several decades in order to protect themselves from declining demand or prices for specific commodities. He writes, "It's also important to recognize that the types of agricultural products the United States exports have shifted through time. In the 1970s, a majority, 70% or more, of the value of ag exports were bulk exports. They were shipments of commodity wheat, corn, soybeans, etc. More recently, exports of consumer-oriented agricultural products have grown significantly. Those products, such as meats, dairy products, fruits, nuts, and prepared foods, accounted for 47% of the value of exports in 2017. Bulk exports accounted for half the value of exports in the 1970s. Today they are at 35%. However, published statistics paint a complicated picture. A study published in January 2025 in the journal PLOS One shows that U.S. crop diversity is significantly lower today than it was 30 years ago. An analysis of the costs and benefits of monoculture versus polyculture farming concluded, despite some benefits of monoculture for industrial agriculture, the environmental disadvantages of this method of farming in the long run outweigh its positive aspects. That is why it is important to move to smarter agricultural approaches and practices. Although it may seem obvious, it's worth mentioning that the best alternative to monocultures is a polyculture system. That is, constant alternation of different types of crops in the given farmlands. Polyculture helps different species of crops complement each other and make better use of soil nutrients. An example of departure from monocultures in the European Union is the Greening Initiative, or green payment, which consists in providing an annual subsidy to farmers who incorporate planet-friendly approaches and methods of growing crops. And now let's take a look at agricultural imports. The USDA indicates U.S. agriculture imports during 2024 were around $204 billion. What few of us appreciate is the fact that we import most of the seafood we consume and over 1/3 of our fresh produce. California plays an enormous part in our agricultural sector. Over 1/3 of the country's vegetables and over 3/4 of the country's fruits and nuts are grown in California. Sales in 2023 amounted to $59.4 billion. A great sigh of at least temporary relief exists because during 2024, reservoirs were above normal levels, aided by favorable precipitation early in the season. Acreage planted in almonds dropped for the 3rd consecutive year in California, reflecting a shift in land and water use for growing annual crops. Downward pressure on prices for staple crops such as rice, corn, and alfalfa resulted in increased planting of tomatoes. However, production actually fell by 12% from 2023 due to extensive heat waves and other factors. Heavy rains in late November and early December added needed water to California's reservoirs. However, January was very dry, and climatologists are concerned because there is little snowpack in the mountains to replenish reservoirs as the year progresses. What about organics? In 2022, there were 17,047 farms in the U.S. certified as organic by the USDA National Organic Program, a 4% decrease from the previous year. California continues to be the top state for organic sales, accounting for 39% of the total value of certified organic agricultural products sold. Milk and chicken are the two top organic commodities with more than $1 billion sales each. As of 2021, here is a more complete list of the organic food retail sales by category. I'll linger on this page for just a moment so you can take a look. Well, there's a 40% problem that we have to deal with. Americans waste about a pound of food per person each day, which comes to 150,000 tons of food tossed out by U.S. households every day. Too little thought is as yet given to the environmental damage caused by the methane generated by all of the rotting food in our landfills. Every year, the amount of food waste generated is around 38 million tons, only 5% of which is diverted away from landfills and incinerators. Growing this food requires 30 million acres of land, 780 million pounds of pesticides, and 4.2 trillion gallons of irrigated water. In response, some cities have adopted ordinances that require restaurants to separate all compostable materials from other waste. Food kitchens providing meals to low-income individuals are forming partnerships with restaurants and other organizations to recover unconsumed food. Colleges have started compost programs utilizing cafeteria scraps. Elsewhere, college students are delivering cafeteria leftovers to local food shelters. Another positive development is that at least a few of the world's largest food companies are measuring and publicly reporting on their food loss and waste. In the United States, Campbell Soup Company, Kellogg Company, Unilever, and Walmart all have active food loss and waste reduction programs. Well, there is something positive to report with regard to land being returned to agriculture use. In many U.S. cities, extensive areas have been abandoned by industry and by residents. Slowly, some of these areas are being converted into community gardens and even urban farms. The city of Detroit, which in 2013 had some 200,000 vacant parcels of land, passed a new urban agriculture ordinance. The result has been the creation of more than 1,350 community gardens. One company, Hance Woodlands, owned by Detroit resident John Hance, acquired 1,500 parcels in 2013 with plans to establish a large urban farm. Opposition from community groups and city officials concerned about one individual gaining control over a large amount of land, even if currently abandoned and having almost no sales value, forced Hance to change his plans. He purchased 150 acres of land at $200 per acre from the city. Hance demolished 50 blighted houses, clearing the land of trash and weeds, and began to plant trees with the intent of eventually harvesting the timber. Since starting, Hartz Woodlands has cleared more than 2,000 parcels and invested over $1 million to remove 77 dangerous structures and rehabilitate 79 houses. A reclaimed vacant commercial structure now serves as the Hartz Woodlands office. There are critics, of course, as one has noted. I do not believe Hartz and Mennonite pastor farmer Michael Score are racist. They sincerely believe the free market will serve their self-interest while benefits spill over into the neighborhoods adjacent to Hartz Woodlands. This project has helped a few neighbors, but my concern, based on a systemic and historic analysis of Detroit, is that it is contributing to the racialized schizophrenia that King prophetically critiqued, the means and ends masked by unacknowledged white supremacy and class privilege. Another economically distressed northern city, Cleveland, is also undergoing a dramatic expansion of community gardens and urban farming. Even New York City has managed to cultivate vacant land. Brooklyn is home to a gigantic rooftop farm called Brooklyn Grange. Well, that's it for the story of agriculture right now. What's next? We are a nation that relies heavily on borrowing to acquire much of what we purchase and consume. Our government at all levels also borrows in order to fund the construction of new infrastructure as well as to balance budgets. In short, we are at risk of death by debt strangulation. We will explore these issues next.